here's a family that I made friends with. And what's interesting, this is our first project. It was called Inuit, which means the people's stories or storytellers. Meanings of well-being and sadness and suicide among Inuit. So that was our first study. And it was participatory. All of my research has been participatory, which means that the people you are, quote, studying are actually co-researchers. They are studying themselves. It's also their project. So with our project, it actually started, believe it or not, at a suicide prevention conference that I was invited to. And I was asked to be on a panel. And it was just Inuit on the panel, and then me, Roma. Most of the audience was Inuit, and they had translation. We had headphones from Inuit to English, so it's pretty interesting. What we decided to do, because the panel was on suicide research in the North. How do we do research on suicide? So we decided to ask the people, what are their questions about suicide? What do they think they should learn about suicide so they can prevent it? And we had a lot of people giving us ideas and comments and suggestions. I was taking lots of notes. And then we asked them, how should we do this project? You know what they said? That was my first lesson in what's called participatory action research. They said, we need to all work together very collaboratively. We can have some white researchers from the South who have worked up here, but we want elders and youth, adults from the communities involved in putting this project together right from the beginning. So at the end of the conference, 3 days later, I was sitting at a big table like this, big round table. And a lot of the people had been at that first session, that was on the first day. And I said to them, you know, I took a lot of notes. We actually have a project. Do you guys want to do it? And they all said, yes, yes. They were mostly Inuit. So one Inuit woman said that she was going to organize a steering committee of elders, youth, adults. I was going to go south and organize a research team across disciplines and universities of people who've done research in the North, hopefully on something to do with mental health or well-being. So I did that, and together with the steering committee, we worked for about 3 or 4 years developing the project. Originally, the steering committee named 2 communities, one with a high suicide rate and one with a very low suicide rate. Igloolik had the low suicide rate, and Kikiktaljua, when at the end, had that super high one. We decided to compare them because one of the questions the Inuit had at the conference, one woman, she said, I have a relative who lives in another community. They don't have any suicides. We should learn from them. What are they doing? Maybe my community can learn from their community in terms of why they don't have suicides and why we do. So that was one of our reasons for comparing these communities. But 4 years later, when we got our federal grant, the communities had traded. Kikiktaljua, who had that really high suicide rate, they had not had a suicide in the last 4 years. Igloolik had a whole bunch of youth suicides, went way up. We're going, oh, we can't compare them, they're changing. The steering committee told me that Kikiktaljua, that high rate community that had come down, with no suicides, they said they did something themselves. So when you go there, ask them what they did. We need to learn. So I did that. We had 4 interviewers. We spent 2 months in the winter, January, February, March, 3 months actually. We interviewed 100 Inuit from ages 18 to 94. male and female were the same, in two communities, Inuit and Kikitandua. We asked them questions that the Inuit asked at that conference. So the questions were actually ones that the Inuit gave us. What does health mean? How are you healthy? How are you happy? What makes you happy? What makes you sad? And then they wanted us to ask about suicide. Why does suicide happen in this community? And in Kikitandua, I asked, why have the suicides come down so much? You haven't had any suicides for 4 years. And in Inuit, we were asking, why does suicides go up so much? And two of the interviewers were Inuit. One was a graduate student that worked with me, a white grad student. So we did all those interviews. And one of the things we found was that in spite of the family changes that we've seen, the intergenerational problems and so on, family was still absolutely number one as far as well-being, mental health, happiness. Family, family, family. It was everything. The second theme we found in our interviews was talking and communication. How important talking and communication was for well-being and happiness. And that overlapped in a huge way with the family. And the third major theme we found was cultural values and practices. They were important for everybody, even the young people. So young boys learning to hunt, young girls learning to sew animal skins to make clothing. Those are very traditional practices among the Inuit. They were important for young people. There was one school in Kikitandua, actually there was one elementary school and one high school in each community. And in the high school, the kids were taking courses for credit where the boys would learn how to make fish spears, these three-pronged fish spears, and the girls were learning to sew gawatik, or the snow boots. And they were doing that for credit. Cultural. But the schools otherwise paid pretty much no attention to culture. What's interesting is all the white teachers, they lived in one part of the community. And I had an Inuit friend, and he was taking me through the community one time, and we passed the white part where all the white teachers lived. And he said, you know what we call that? The ghost town, because we don't know anybody there. They never talk to us. They just stay among themselves. Which is interesting because the whole year I spent there, I think I spoke to a white person just a couple of times. Somebody who worked for the government, but he helped me get that house actually. Because it was a government house. So these three things, family, communication, and culture, were the most important things for well-being. For unhappiness, not being with family, not talking, being disconnected from your culture. Like the kids who were not, like the boys who were not hunting, and there were a lot of them, they just didn't hunt at all. Their fathers or uncles didn't take them out. It's a guy thing. They were not doing as well in school. They were not as happy. The kids who were doing the hunting and so on, they were actually better students. They were happier. So culture made a big difference. And family and suicide prevention. I actually spoke to a lot of young people who had tried to kill themselves. You know how they kill themselves up there? Every culture has its own script on how to kill yourselves. You know how white people do it in the States? Bang. You know how Native Americans do it? Hanging. Up there, it's hanging. But you know how they hang themselves? The kids? They go into their bedroom closet at night when the family is asleep. They push the clothes on the closet rod to the right. They tie a noose about this long to the closet rod. The noose is about this high off the ground. They go on their knees. Their knees are about this high off the ground. They face the wall, and they die. That's their script. Most of the kids do it that way. But I talked to a lot of kids who didn't. Either a sister, somebody came, stopped them, the rope broke, whatever. And I asked them, why are you still alive? What kept you from killing yourself? You know what they said? Family. I talked to somebody in my family. I talked to my mother, talked to my grandfather, talked to my aunt, talked to my sister. They helped me stay alive. Family, family, family. So family was a major source of suicide prevention. Pretty cool. Here's Igloo during recess. You can see the kids outside. This is a picture of Kikitadra with the high suicide rate. It's a much smaller community in the mountains on the east coast. And the philosophy of all of our projects is called Nunalini Silatuningit, which is their word for community wisdom. So, because it's participatory, we want to find out the people's own stories. They are the experts on their lives. I'm not an expert on their life. They are the experts, so that is where our stories came from.